Okay, hello everybody and welcome to today's London Business School event, Financing Your Masters. I will give it a couple more seconds. I think we've still got people joining us now. Okay, we'll get started for now. So today really is for anybody who is researching coming along to London Business School for a degree programme this year, or maybe starting next year instead, and maybe have already submitted an application as well, and are now doing some research on how you will fund your programme. So my name is Charlotte Smith. I'm the Senior Global Recruitment Manager for the MBA Master in Finance and Early Careers programmes at London Business School. I'm delighted today to be joined by Robert Pennell, who is International Student Support at LBS. Rob will be delivering the majority of today's presentation. And we also have Greg Moore with us, who is a Senior Business Development Manager at London Business School, who is going to talk to you a little bit about corporate funding as well. So to give you an idea of that, the presentation today will go through, first of all finance options for funding your study, whether it be through some of the loan companies that we partner with or self-funding, etc. I am going to talk to you a little bit about scholarships that we have available for all of our degree programmes at LBS. And then finally, we'll hand over to Greg to go over corporate funding. There will be plenty of time today for a Q&A, so please do start to send your questions through on that Q&A tab. I will moderate them and we'll probably have about 20 to 30 minutes to get through questions. At the end, we'll also give you an email address for if you had any questions that were unanswered, whether it be towards the visa and funding team or through to my team in recruitment. If you have not yet submitted an application, have a query about your funding or anything else to do with your application. So I think we have most people with us now. So a big welcome again to everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where in the world you are. I know people are joining us from all over the world today. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. And thank you for joining us. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Rob to go through finance options with you.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks, Charlotte. As Charlotte mentioned, my name's Rob Pennell. I work in the financial aid department. Another part of my role is visas and immigration. So if you do intend to come to the school at some point, I'm almost definitely going to be interacting with you at one stage or the other. Today, we're going to start off by looking at the role of the financial aid office. So what we can and can't do, common queries that we can resolve. And then we're going to take a look at some of the main lenders that tend to be the most common and popular options for LBS students. It's not going to cover everything because obviously it's impossible to cover every lender globally, but we're going to try and cover most of the main, the majority of companies which are used. And then at the end, we're going to briefly talk about what we've established to be the keys to success. So things that you can do now to make your life easier later, even after you've arrived at the school. Okay. So if we can have the first slide, please, Charlotte. Okay, so the role of the financial aid office. So often the role, it's a little bit of a misnomer. So financial aid kind of implies that we help students with their finances, which to a certain extent we do, but really our main role is to administer and manage loan applications and disbursements. So when your loan provider, the majority of the loan providers will pay the school, and then the school will then break up disbursements and make sure they are directed to the right account, whether that's for tuition fees or for living costs. We liaise with loan providers, we talk to them, we try and iron out problems if we can. We aren't involved in the decision-making process, we can't get involved in that. But what we can do is iron out problems if we think there's been a mistake made, or if, for instance, there's not been enough information passed on. We can act as a liaison. So we confirm that you've arrived at the school. We confirm living costs, tuition fees, all of the administrative work that goes on in the background, that means that your loan comes from the loan provider and hopefully ends up with the school and then on to you. We fill out a lot of certifications and approvals to loan companies. What we don't do, and this is something which is often misunderstood, is we're not involved in scholarships or bursaries. So we don't distribute funds through the school directly. We don't organise or decide or award scholarships to students. That is something which is carried out by your admissions team. So at LBS, the admissions team will always consider every student that is eligible for a scholarship, and they will make a decision on that and get in touch with you if you've been successful. Okay, next slide, please, Charlotte. Okay, so we're going to start off with what's probably the most common loan product which utilised by LBS students. That's Prodigy Finance. Prodigy have connections with the school. They're probably one of the first loan companies which the school has been regularly involved with. You can borrow full cost of fees for all programs, and you can borrow living expenses for the MBA program. So the MBA program, they're the only course where you can have living expenses on a Prodigy loan. The financial aid office, we confirm that your costs, your tuition fees, and we confirm that you're enrolled at the school, and we also work out and so provide information on internal scholarships. So if you've been lucky enough to have a scholarship, Prodigy will know that that's been paid, and that will be calculated into your loan offer. So one thing which is unusual with Prodigy Finance is they have quite a complicated application procedure. They want to know a lot of details about you. They have a complex algorithm where they take a lot of factors into account when they decide on whether, how much, and what the terms of your loan are going to be like. So the interest rates very much depend on what the perceived risk is for them. They disperse 3 instalments to LBS over the course of the year. What will happen is the Prodigy funds arrive with the school and the school's account. The financial aid office are responsible for breaking down that single payment into the specific student amounts, and then making sure that your tuition fee invoices, which come out at roughly the same time as the disbursements, are met. And then any funds which are remaining for MBA students, we will then be in contact with you, and the accounts team will ask you where you would like the remaining living costs to be deposited. You'll be able to provide them with your bank details, and then we can make sure that the money goes to the right place. Repayment situation is 7 years, so it works out 111 months in total. You have a grace period of 6 months if you wish to take it up, or you can start paying immediately if you want to. And so that's a 7-year repayment plus the study period, obviously 21 months. That's based on the MBA program. Okay, Charlotte, next slide, please. So Future Finance, a similar type of company to Prodigy, a private company. They lend to UK and EU students only, and they'll only lend in pounds. So this can be used for course fees. Again, it's a similar system. They disperse directly to LBS, and then the only difference being your costs of living will come separately. So the invoice will be paid to LBS for your tuition fees and living funds. The company Future Finance will be in touch with you and ask you where you want your cost of living element of your loan to be paid to, and then you'll have the option of providing a bank details, and then that transfer will take place. Again, 3 disbursements, roughly in line with the invoice dates for tuition fees. You can borrow between 2,500 to 40,000, everything in between. Again, it's a similar situation where they take a lot of your applicant details into account when they decide to tailor an offer for you. They do involve co-signers often. Future Finance, they're looking for a co-signer, a guarantor, especially for living expenses loans. And again, loan terms up to 10 years and 3 months after graduation. So a longer repayment term with Future Finance than is the case with Prodigy. For an interesting thing that they do offer is full repayment holidays. So that works quite well. It can mean that you get a bit more flexibility with your repayments. Obviously early repayment options as well, as is common with a lot of UK providers of loans. You're allowed to repay early. You'll get a 2% induction interest rate reduction after your graduation on that if you choose to repay early. Okay, Charlotte, next slide, please. Lendwise. Now, Lendwise are a relatively new organisation that the school's becoming involved with. Previously, they only lent to UK students. That's been pushed out UK and EU, and now we have the ability to accept applications from US and Canada as well. So that's something which could be of use, which is relatively new. Again, it's a similar system in that the application is really focused on your overall profile. It's not like a normal bank loan where they're going to take into account just your credit score. They're going to look at your background, your previous salary, your potential for earnings after you finished at the school, up to £100,000, up to 10 years. So the actual terms of the loan are a little bit similar to Future Finance in many ways. The interest rate's fixed for the full term of your loan, and it's calculated depending on the perceived risk of the agreement. 7.9% has there. I'm not sure, but that's going to need to be checked. I mean, I've looked at it recently and that was the case, but with everything that's going on at the moment, it's difficult to know what's going to happen with interest rates. So you're going to need to check that. So no co-signers generally, which is can be useful, and no collateral guarantees or guarantors required. And again, there's no early repayment penalties. So if you're lucky enough to walk into a job where you find yourself with lots of available funding to repay, you can repay early if you want on your loan. Again, there's quite a lot of flexibility involved in this type of loan. There's nothing to pay during study. Interestingly, if you look at Lendwise, Future Finance and Prodigy, you're not expected to pay anything to repay any of your loan while you're studying, and then you'll always have that 6 months grace period to establish yourself post-study to get organised and start to repay your loan afterwards. Loan applications, I mean, with all of these three loans that we've just talked about, I don't think you could really approach them too early. It's a good idea to approach early and to make plans. You can submit applications for any of these three lenders after you're at the school. So for instance, there's potential for an emergency application or an extension of an existing application. They're very flexible, all three, being private companies rather than government organisations, if you like. Okay, Charlotte, can we move on? UK Masters Loan. So the Masters Loan requires you to be a UK or EU citizen with residency in the UK for the last 3 years. It works along a similar terms as a standard UK student loan. You would need to be your first master's course. So if you've sat a master's before, you're not going to be able to apply for a UK master's loan from the UK government. It's really a one-hit wonder. There's a maximum of £10,000, which is split depending on how long your course is. If you're sitting a 1-year early careers course, they'll pay you £10,000 in 3 disbursements over the year, and you can spend that money on whatever you want. There's no obligation to service tuition fees. Often it's used as an emergency funding option later on in the course. Some UK and EU students are able to apply, and it's paid directly to you. You can choose where and when you have that money handed over to you. Again, we follow a certification and confirmation of enrolment system where you would come in, we do a face-to-face meeting, and then we go online on the portal and we confirm that you are a student, and then the disbursement procedure takes place. There's an email address there for the master's loan. It's a .gov website. If you're interested in looking at that, the terms are pretty straightforward and the application's fully online. Okay, Charlotte. So this is probably the big one. I mean, we have a considerable amount of US students studying at LBS. The US federal student loan, it's US dollars only, and it's USA predominantly, although there is a similar system in place in Canada. So forgive us, but we've lumped them together as US and Canada. You apply by means of an online application called a FAFSA, and you will receive an agreement of funding back from the US Federal Student Loan Company. The disbursements are made directly to the school, and then again, they're broken down and then redirected out to you for living costs after your tuition fees have been met. Certain non-eligible, to be eligible for a US loan, you need to be a US national or what they call an eligible citizen. That's somebody who's living in the US, who's not necessarily a US student, but has got residency rights. That was decided during the application procedure. You can cover full cost of attendance, and as well as living costs for the MBA, for any course. Scholarships are taken into account when the calculation is made to how much you will be able to borrow. So the US federal loan system will look at your current situation, will look into how, what your income is, what your expenditure is, and what your previous borrowing patterns have been through the US federal loan system, and they'll make you an offer based on that. It's got two different types of loan. So the direct unsubsidized loan is 6.8%, and then the higher rate for the plus loan. The plus loan often requires a co-signer, but most students, or a lot of students, use both options to bump up the amount that they've got at their disposal. You could apply online. Get in touch with us at the Financial Aid Office if you want further details on it. But recently, the US federal loan website has been quite well developed. It's got everything that you need on there to make an application, and all the complexities are all gone through part by part on it. Thanks, Charlotte. So US, another option for US and Canadian students is Sallie Mae loan. Sallie Mae, I'm sure all you US students out there are going to know that's a bank in the US. It's a private loan, so it's quite flexible in a lot of ways. If they have a co-signer, often we see students arriving at the school with really considerable loans from Sallie Mae. I mean, in reality, you're free to borrow what you feel you can repay. What happens with the Sallie Mae loan is it's distributed. The money is either given to the school for tuition fees, and they're partnered with a company called Cambridge FX, and they do an electronic transfer system. So you can have your Sallie Mae loan paid into a UK bank account, or you can choose to have a cheque as well paid to a US address. Full cost of attendance again, plus living expenses, similar system to all the others really. Variable interest rates. So that is probably from the loan providers that we've talked about. They have a variable interest rate that can change throughout the course of your loan. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I would think that it would be worth checking that fully before taking out a loan with Sallie Mae. But again, because it's a private company, you retain quite a lot of flexibility in how and when you want to repay. There'll be the option to repay early if you want to. Okay, Charlotte, thank you. So over the years, obviously, we've had students come in and come to visit us at Financial Aid, and we've identified some areas which can lead to problems and some common pitfalls. So we put together these kind of keys to success for you. I think one of the most important things is to think about the second year. If you're coming to study for 2 years, often it's very easy to get, you know, excited about the potential for coming to LBS, but often students don't make adequate planning for year 2. There's a presumption that often MBA students, they're going to be working, which certainly is correct, but not always. I mean, there are situations where students can run out of money in year 2. And if that happens, then obviously you'll be able to come to visit the financial aid office and we'll be able to do what we can to help. But a better solution is to make sure that you've done adequate planning before you get to that stage. So when you arrive at the school, you've got your budgets for year 1 and 2 already organised. You shouldn't, if you're going to come to the UK and you're on a tier 4 visa, you're going to be using a tier 4 student visa, there will be working hours restrictions attached to that visa, which mean that you'll only be able to work 20 hours during term time per week. And that's a strict rule and it has to be enforced. And that's something that you need to bear in mind if you're planning on coming to the UK and considering work. You're going to be limited to part-time work during the term. So during the vacations, you can work on an unlimited basis for internships, elements of your course. You're going to be able to work on a full-time basis, but you're not going to be able to rely on full-time work to subsidise your income while you're at the school and studying. What we think is a wise move is to aggregate multiple sources of financing. Every year we have students coming to us at the last minute because their loans have been withdrawn. So obviously when you make an agreement with a bank or a lender, they'll give you an outline agreement to say, we agree to lend XYZ. At any point after that, up until the money has transferred, the agreement's not legally binding strictly. So banks can and do either change terms of loans or even cancel completely. We had several EU students come to see us this year who had their loans withdrawn at the last minute. We've had to put together loans for them at the last minute these were all from Prodigy, and rush them through to be able to give them the funds that they needed to meet their tuition fee invoices and also subsidise their living costs. Scholarships, we would say, always check your home country, exhaust any scholarship or bursary potential from your home country. Make sure that you consider all of your options and exhaust your national. If you come from a country where you've got a national student loan system, you're not going to be able to borrow much cheaper than that. So it's important that you look into them options and you maximise your lending through an organised student loan company if that's an option for you. You should check the funding tool. So we've got quite a well-developed funding tool available. It's got all the scholarships, all the bursaries, all the main lenders on there with links to the application sites, and also some of the smaller lenders, which are country specific. So although we're not directly involved in an application of that type, you know, the leads are there on the funding tool to allow you to explore the options available in your home country to finance from home. Contact the financial aid department early. Often what happens is students come to see us too late. Rather than coming in when the problem first arises, that gets left until crisis time, and then we're in a situation where we have to put something together in an emergency. It's much better to come and see us earlier and give us a chance to be able to put some things in place and look for a fix, a workaround to the problem as early as possible. So they're kind of like the main things that you want to be thinking of when you're getting prepared. And I think that's just about it. Contact us at any time as well via email at financialaid@london.edu. We're all pretty friendly office and we're always willing to talk about what your options are and explore further. So brilliant. Thanks very much. That's it, Charlotte.
Thanks, Rob. That's really helpful. I'm sure that was great to hear from all of our international students as well as our UK residents as well. So thanks for running through all of those options for loans and some great top tips at the end there as well. I know there's some common things that we do come across. So what I do want to talk to you all about now are scholarships. I'm sure lots of you would be hoping for a scholarship when you come along to London Business School, and we are very fortunate in that we do have a large portfolio of scholarships available to students throughout all of our degree programmes. But what I would recommend that you do, as Rob did just suggest as well, is that you go on the website to have a look at what scholarships you may be eligible for. The majority of our scholarships do not require further application. You are automatically considered for any that you may be eligible for. But there are some that do require application. So here on this slide, I've put how you can find that. So you go on our website, you can go to master's degrees, then before you arrive section. I recommend that you check out all of that if you haven't yet submitted your application. But then have a look at the financial aid, and there you'll find the search for funding tool that Rob was just referring to. You will see here, I've just put a bit of a screenshot on it, so you can select your program, the type of funding you are looking for, the provider type of the scholarship, so whether it's an external scholarship or LBS, or you can just keep it broad to everything. Your nationality, your gender, you can put all of those details in, and it will then come up with all the scholarships that may be available to you. You can click on each one to find out more information about the value of the scholarship and what the scholarship is there for. The majority of our scholarships are awarded based on merit of your application. We have some scholarships which are awarded on need, but the main purpose of a lot of our scholarships is to support the increase of diversity at LBS. So as an example, we have the Laidlaw scholarship, which we launched just this year, which is 20 full fee scholarships for women from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. That one, for example, does require an application because we need to know a little bit more about your background to decide whether you would be awarded with that scholarship or not. But for the majority of them, as I say, we do not require any further applications. So although you may find a scholarship that you think that you are deserving of and would like to receive that scholarship, please do take all of Rob's advice in terms of considering all of your finance options and not sort of depending on a scholarship if you like. But do have a look on our website and find out about them all. As I say, there is no application process for the majority of them. Okay, hopefully that helps, but any questions on scholarship, feel free to send them through to the Q&A box. I'll now hand over to Greg, who is going to talk you through corporate funding and how that works at London Business School.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Rob, for that information on loans as well. Just a quick introduction about myself. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager at LBS, and in my role, I'm primarily talking to a lot of our corporate partners who have agreements with us, or perhaps just their own internal processes where they are sponsoring their employees to come and study our degree programs. So we're very fortunate to work with a lot of these corporate partners. But I would say that the majority of our sponsored students outside of that, their corporate funding will come from a sort of more informal source. It's some kind of discussion through the appraisal process at their company, some kind of agreement with their managers on a kind of ad hoc basis to help support their studies. And the other part of my role is that I actually speak to a lot of applicants who are looking to have some support with their discussions with their employers, some advice on business cases. So I'll give you some general advice in these next few slides about how you can approach your employer. But to kind of give you an overview, like I said, we do have some organizations that will have very structured internal processes for selecting high-performing, high-potential candidates that work within their organization to go and study one of our degrees, because these organizations realize that they need this kind of training and this kind of development for areas like retention, for succession planning, for their leadership groups. So it's great if you're lucky enough to work for one of these organizations that has that kind of support in place. But I'd say, more and more, this kind of support is more difficult to find. But like I said, that doesn't mean you can't get the support from your employer if they don't have this kind of structure in place. But it just takes a little bit more negotiation and effort on the part of the candidate. Around 30% of our students are sponsored. I mean, it varies depending on the programs. Our part-time programs, we tend to see a lot more student support from their employers there, because I suppose majority of the time they're remaining with their employers while they're studying, and in a lot of cases it makes sense for their employer to support them, even if it just means giving them the flexibility of time to actually come and study the executive MBA or the part-time Masters in Finance. So that being said, I think there are some questions you need to ask yourself before you actually come to ask your employer for sponsorship. And I think mainly you want to clarify what your motivations for doing the program are. If you're looking to use the executive MBA or the MBA to leverage a move into another organization, perhaps make a career switch into a different industry, which a lot of our students will do. It's a very common course of action for students wanting to do an MBA. But I think you need to consider the ramifications of that with your current employer if you're going to ask them for sponsorship. You don't want to be burning your bridges, or it's quite unlikely, I think, that an employer will support you if that's what your real intentions are. Also, how is your performance viewed? How are you viewed within the organization? Are you on some kind of high potential earmarked for kind of leadership track? If so, I think you're in a strong position there, because often organizations will want to do what they can to retain individuals like you and to develop you and train you. Also, you need to look at what is already available within the organization. Most companies will have some provision for this already, and that might be with other external providers. It might be internal training that the organization offers. There may be some provision for going and studying part-time courses or online courses already there. And probably the first question you'll get asked when you approach your HR or L&D will be, well, have you considered what we already offer? So you need to think about where does London Business School's offering sit into what your company already offers if they don't align, what extra benefit does going and doing a London Business School program and your employer supporting you through that offer that isn't already there? Also, are there any internal advocates? Are there former alumni or current alumni, of London Business School or other business schools at your organization? Those who have seen the benefits of how it can support and develop an individual and accelerate a career, and what benefits that brings to the organization of having employees who are trained and have these qualifications. I think it's important to find those advocates, because they can speak on your behalf. When you get into the sort of negotiations of it, it gives you some credibility. And I think, particularly if there are senior individuals who are alumni of London Business School, or any of our programs really, or even other top business schools as well, can be helpful. Usually there's, my experience, there's a lot of people willing to share about their experience and to speak the benefits of going to business school. So if I could have the next slide, please, Charlotte. Great, thanks. So I would suggest, having if you are interested in asking for support and you've asked yourself these questions, you've realized that it makes sense for your employer to support you in your opinion. Then I think the next step is to have a conversation with your line manager or L&D team, probably both, I would say, and to ask about the possibility. It might be that they're very open to it. Perhaps they won't initially be open to it. And I think probably the best thing I can suggest is to make sure that when you're going to speak to them, you have really done your homework. So you've researched the program that you want to study thoroughly. You've built yourself at least the outline of a business case. Perhaps they won't immediately ask you for a written, formal business case. That might come later on down the line, but at least in your head the kind of key selling points of why that you doing this program is going to bring benefit to the organization and to yourself as well, but primarily what's going to be the return on investment for your company. Beyond, I would caution against saying it's focusing on the retention part of it, and think about the kind of tangible benefits it can bring them. Be persistent, and to keep badgering your manager about it. If you're having an appraisal, a formal appraisal process, to bring it up in that process when you talk about your future development. There may be other individuals that you need to get on board within the organization. Perhaps if you have a good network internally, it's worth bringing in advocates who are perhaps not alumni of the school or business school alumni, but influential individuals that are supportive of you doing this. So, like I said, present the advantages to them. And there are a number of different programs that we have sponsor students on, and these all have individual components to them which could bring a lot of benefit to an organization. And I actually have some on our website developed some notes that perhaps would be what I would suggest you use to build a business case out, and it will highlight some key areas of, say, the executive MBA, the MBA, the MIF, to what that could potentially bring to an organization. So for example, you could talk about if you have certain KPIs to deliver on, and chances are, if you're doing a part-time program, for example, those KPIs won't change, even though you're in the office for less time. So you want to be able to, first of all, address the fact that you're going to need this flexibility in time if you're doing a part-time program. But there will be ways in which perhaps the program can help you meet these targets, even though you are out of the office, in the office for less time. For example, the London Business School network, which is an excellent network, vast, covers the globe, and is very active and strong, has very strong links. And also your actual class network that you'll be studying with is a valuable source of potential clients and customers, for example. That's just one example there where you could say, having access to this opens up a whole new area of business for us. So let's just give you one example. And like I said, I think for the part-time programs, it's important to have a discussion at least about flexibility of time, even if there is no financial contribution on the table. But you can talk about those two things hand in hand, I think. Can I have the next slide, please, Charlotte? So, like I said, think about what the return on investment is when you're building your business case. What is London Business School's brand going to do for the organization by having employees who have that on their CV? What kind of, that gives you a sort of a mark of quality, if you will, which I think could help for, hopefully help to generate new business. It could, give you, I guess, a bit more like credibility in negotiations. There are lots of ways in which the brand could help. I've mentioned the network. There could be individual electives and courses that are relevant to what you do. Say, negotiation and bargaining, for example. That if you are involved in a lot of deals and a lot of negotiations, actually coming and learning from thought leaders in this area, and with kind of real practical implementable learning like we have at London Business School, will probably almost certainly see an immediate impact in your day-to-day, and hopefully be able to grow and meet and exceed your targets through that. So I think about that like tangible return on investment there. next point I've mentioned already. You know, how does this fit in with where you sit within the organization? Retention, you know, do they want to keep you within the organization long term, and where does that fit in with their succession planning? And then finally, I would say, you know, make sure you've done your due diligence, not just on the program you want to study at LBS. You know, not just, I mean, you will need to know that program like the back of your hand, but also on other programs. I think it's a good idea to present some kind of value curve as part of a business case, to have some other options that you've perhaps explored, and to sort of, you know, by comparison, so that, you know, I think that shows, you know, HR director or you know, whoever's the decision maker in your organization, that you've really done your homework, you've thought this through, and it isn't kind of a, you know, a personal whim. It's something that you've really planned out and you think is going to be mutually beneficial for you and them. So yeah, presenting some kind of value curve, other options that perhaps are similar, but, you know, don't meet the requirements that you have, and also the requirements of the organization. So I believe that is it. But like I mentioned, there are resources on the website for building a business case, some guidance notes, an example case there. And you know, my email address is on the slide, I believe. Oh no, it isn't, but we can certainly post this out. It's investintalent@london.edu, and if you'd like to email that, get in touch with me. Happy to discuss business case, and, you know, any kind of guidance, and yeah, how to move that forward. So if I can be of any help, you know, more than happy to answer questions about corporate funding as well.
Thank you, Greg. I think that's really helpful. Maybe for some of you who are already considering that route, and maybe some of you who hadn't considered that route, but are planning on remaining with your companies following studying, that would be an option for you. Yes, as Greg said, please do reach out. I'm sure we can pop his email address in the Q&A box a little bit later as well.
Yes. Well, one more thing, Charlotte, I would say is that a lot of people just they believe that company sponsorship isn't an option, and they've looked at the formal offering and it's not there. But I just want to sort of reinforce the point that for a lot of people that is the case, and actually the sponsorship only comes through these other discussions, and their manager going and finding the money for it somewhere else, in other budgets, not necessarily in the L&D budget. And if that is something that makes sense for you, if you are intending to stay and progress at the organization, then it's worth asking for it. And even if you hadn't already considered it, or you thought that it wasn't going to be an option, it could be, but it just might require a little bit of investigation, a little bit of work.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. Okay, so jumping onto the Q&A, thank you so much for everybody who has sent a question through. I can see we've got lots here to get through, so we'll get through as many as we can, and we'll remove the slide in a moment, but just as a sort of final warning, just please get all the email addresses you need off that slide before we disappear. So to be clear, anything financial and visa based can go through to financialaid@london.edu or to visas@london. Scholarships, this is one of the questions actually, so I'll just address it now. One of the questions that came through was around when do I find out if I've been successful for a scholarship? Is it when I find out if I have been offered a place? So first you would be offered a place at LBS. Once you have been sent that offer, all of the people who have been offered a place onto that degree program will then be considered for the scholarships that are available for that program. The admissions committee will make that decision. If in that time from when you were offered to finding out about a scholarship decision, you can contact your admissions team to share your interest in a scholarship. Somebody has also asked, what if there are lots of scholarships which are eligible for me? Try to find one which you think is particularly right for you, and try to consider your reasons for why that would be sort of the scholarship for you, if you like. Some scholarships will have more than one scholarship awarded, and some will only have one. So you will need to think carefully about which one is the right one for you, and which one you would like to share your interest in. So hopefully that clears that up. And then anything else that you have questions about, whether it be sort of more program specific, start dates, anything like that, you can send through to masters@london.edu. That all comes through to my recruitment team for all of the programs, and we'll be able to put you in the right direction to get that question answered. Okay, so I will now stop sharing my screen so that you can see all three of us and jump into some questions. So the first one, Rob, I'm going to ask you, as I'm sure it's a question that you do get, and you probably have an idea in terms of when lending from loan partners, how much students borrow for living costs. So the question is around what are the estimated average living costs for LBS students? And I know this is really broad depending on your lifestyle, right, and how you want to live in London. But can you give any sort of idea for that question, please?
As you say, it is an extremely difficult question to answer, really, because one thing with LBS students in particular is they've got a huge variety of different lifestyles, and also different age groups, different backgrounds, different previous work, different expectations. So it is really, really hard to answer that question. What I think would be a better way to approach an answer that would be for the person who's asked the question to shoot a mail to financial aid with an outline of your situation, and then we would be able and what your expectations are, and we would then be able to put something together which would give you more of an indication of how much you're going to need to borrow. But I think quite importantly, especially with Prodigy, Future Finance and Lemwise, they will have recommended figures for living costs and tuition fees. They're going to know what the average is, because Prodigy, they're quite big on asking for feedback from previous loan holders, so they know roughly what people's expenditure are, and they're going to be able to guide you with how much you're going to need.
Thanks, Rob. That's a good answer. I know it's a difficult one, so sorry to stop.
That's all right.
Next question then, a few questions about scholarships. Maybe I can help with this. Asking about whether an early application increases your chances of being awarded a scholarship. Thank you for this question. It's a question that we often get. It does in some senses. So for some of the programs, you're maybe with a better chance of being awarded with a scholarship if you apply in the earlier rounds. So for all of our programs, we have rounds of application, generally starting from the September, August, before the start date. So for example, applications will open in August this year for our programs which start in August 2021. If you apply in one of those earlier rounds, so between sort of September and January, you may be a little bit more likely to be awarded a scholarship because all of the scholarship funding is still available at that point. Whereas later on, there will be less available as the year goes on because we will have already awarded some of it. So I would, if you can, recommend, and if you're ready in every other sense of your application, I would always recommend applying earlier if you're ready. If you're not ready and you're rushing it just for the purposes of a scholarship, then I don't think it's worth it because you'd be risking your offer chances. So first of all, please ensure you're ready. If you're ready to apply and every other part of your application is ready, then yes, apply earlier to have more chance and more available scholarships. So hopefully that helps with that question. Okay, another question about course fees. So where they're advertised on the website, is this for 1 year or 2 years, where it's a 2-year program? So all the fees that we advertise are the full costs of the program itself. So somebody's asked specifically about MIF part-time, so that cost there is for the full 2-year period of the program. Okay, let me have a look because new questions are popping up as we go. So let's see what else we have here. So I had another one for Robert, a Brexit question, which you might have been a little bit used to. So for the year starting 2021, do you know if or how Brexit will impact the applications in terms of funding applications and scholarships to EU citizens. Will any of those loan partners change? Because I know some of them were UK and Europe.
Nothing should change as far as we know at the moment. Of course, the problem that we've got with Brexit is we don't know whether Brexit is going to be engaged fully on December the 31st this year, or whether that's going to be pushed out for another year, depending on the outcome of the negotiations which are going on at the moment. But from practical terms, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of effect for EU students who are coming to the UK. I mean, there will be immigration requirements which we'll be helping with all the way through. That as kind of like another element of our job. But from a financial perspective, I don't foresee any issues. The banking regulations are still very similar between the EU and the UK. Everything is pretty much in alignment. So I don't foresee there being a huge change compared to the system that we've got in place at the moment.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, another question about Prodigy, asking whether they can, if they have all of their funding in place for the first year, but they would like to borrow from Prodigy just for the second year. Is that possible? They feel that from what they've read, it's not possible. So maybe you could just confirm.
Yeah, I mean, you can apply for all of the loan options. You can apply on an emergency basis or at other points during your studies. I mean, we know, especially for the MBAs, situations change. Sometimes students pick up work opportunities and they find themselves not requiring the amount of loan that they need. So it's all pretty flexible. We can do applications for Prodigy further down the line or on an emergency basis later on in the studies if the situations don't work out as expected. Yeah, and that's the same for US federal loans as well, by the way. If anyone wanted to do an application for a federal loan, they can, again, do that at any point. The only caveat that I would add to that is that we can only disperse a Prodigy loan on one of the scheduled Prodigy disbursement dates. There is a facility to do emergency disbursements, but generally we try to avoid that. We've got a new structure now in place where we're doing 1 monthly disbursements for emergencies and then 3 standard disbursement dates across the course of the year. So often, in most situations where a student just decided that they needed to do a Prodigy application to subsidise their living costs or their tuition fees, we would normally be asking them to have to wait for a few weeks until we reach the disbursement date.
Thanks, Rob. Could you also just confirm, I've seen a couple of questions, one specifically around Latin American students, the other one around Indian students, the loans available, just to confirm which of those loan partners you went through are available for all international students.
Depending on the course, I suppose, for early careers students, there isn't a living costs element open to them from Prodigy. They're not going to be able to borrow for living costs for the early careers students. It's only the MBA students who have the potential to borrow for living costs. What I think in that situation, what we would normally do is we would be urging them to check the funding tool and to look for domestic student loan options. And then, of course, I mean, there's another situation in that we don't know what's going to happen with other lenders in the future, whether the terms and the conditions of student loans, for private student loans, are going to change from Future Finance and Lendwise. We don't know whether that's going to be an option, but I do think that, okay, tuition fees, no problem with Prodigy, but living costs, you're gonna need to get something organised for that because Prodigy won't lend for living costs. So I think in that situation, you are a little bit limited. I think the focus needs to be on domestic lenders from your home country or other options of funding, self-funding, savings, loans. Of course, you've got the option of private loans as well, a standard bank loan, that would work. I mean, although you couldn't use that for visa purposes. It would be perfectly acceptable to, you know, to have a loan in place to subsidise your income while you're getting to the end of your course. And of course, with the early careers courses, in some ways it's a little easier because the course is shorter. So you've got a lot more stability, really. There's a much less chance that your lifestyle is going to change dramatically in the same way as it would over some of the longer courses. So I think that's probably the best way to look at that.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, Greg, a question which is maybe for you and I. How can an LBS alumnus in the organisation help a prospective candidate with respect to getting financial aid, scholarship? I think maybe sponsorship as well is tied to that. So if I can just start with that one by saying that if you know an LBS alum who you work with, or maybe you even just know them personally, they can definitely support the merit of your application because they can recommend you to us. So if you are submitting an application and you know somebody currently studying or who has studied at LBS, they can email that master's email that I gave you, or the program specific email address which you'll find on the website, to request a form to be able to recommend you, or they could send a letter of recommendation if they wanted to as well. But Greg, from your perspective, I know you touched upon this when you were talking corporate funding. Could you just sort of reiterate your point there?
Yeah, I think it's a really useful asset to have if there is somebody in your organisation who is an alumni of the school that can speak on your behalf in terms of the benefits that you doing an MBA or an executive MBA, whatever course it is, will bring to the organization and will do for your career. You know, particularly if it is somebody who has been at the organization a long time and perhaps they were supported by the company and they've seen it pay dividends. So, you know, that I know a number of alumni who fit this description, that they've been, say, with the organization for 20 years and now they're kind of in a very senior position and they're able to speak to the the managers or the L&D HR individuals and sort of say, you know, I'm clear evidence of what this can bring to the organization in terms of retention and development of your top talent. So yeah, I think it's really worthwhile. And like I said, it doesn't even have to be an LBS alum. I think, you know, most sort of business school graduates, I think, will speak to the benefits of business school. Certainly if they've been to a top institution that ranks alongside LBS. But I would say, you know, because I used to work in the admissions team and I used to be on the committee that looked at awarding scholarships as well. Just wanted to add my own opinion on, you know, what kind of makes for a good scholar. And I think, you know, much like our applications, is a holistic process, and you know, Charlotte's kind of, you know, you sort of described this already, but often I think it was and still is finding the highest quality individuals that also had a need element to it. You know, that I think that's the perfect storm for awarding a scholarship, so to speak, is to sort of, you know, somebody who's really, really excellent that you know, we want to come and study our programs, and there's the merit element to it. But also we want these scholarships to have an impact, and you know, I think particularly in the last couple of years, you know, and certainly our new dean is very you know, his focus is very much on the impact that London Business School is having, and you know, the way the world does business and the way business impacts the world. So if we can have an impact on people's lives as well, enable them to do programs where they normally wouldn't be able to without this kind of help, you know, I think that's important. And I think it's important to understand as well that almost everybody that applies will ask for scholarships, because, you know, it's all relative. Ultimately, everybody could use a scholarship for a premium top business school program, but there are some people that it genuinely would make an enormous impact in their lives, and perhaps business school wouldn't be an option without it. So yeah, I think it is a balance there. Like I said, what you can do to increase your chances of getting a scholarship is just making your case effectively, being honest and upfront with the admissions managers, explaining your financial situation in a honest and open way, and then making your application the strongest it can be. And there are very few dials that you can actually turn when you get to applying to business school, because your career history is done and set in stone. Your academics, your first degree is done at that point, most likely. So what are the levers we can pull to improve an application? Things like GMAT or GRE. That's one of the few things that you can actually change now to actually improve the strength of your application. And the stronger your application is going to be, I think the more likely you are to receive scholarships on that merit basis. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Sorry, I've rambled on a little bit there, but that was just my general observations from working in admissions for a bit.
Thanks, Greg. I think that's really important, and a lot of the questions coming in were around scholarships, so you've definitely managed to clarify some of those. Thank you. Which does draw us to the end of today's Q&A and the end of today's session, but thank you so much for sending your questions. If we unfortunately did not get time for your question, please do reach out and send it through anyway. We're happy to help. Hopefully you managed to get those emails just before, but if not, we will be sending a follow-up email to you. It will have today's event and presentation within it, so you'll be able to get the email addresses off there. And otherwise, just send them through to the masters@london.edu email address, and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Rob and Greg, for your insights. Very useful for all our attendees, I'm sure, and best of luck with your applications. Take care.